Hello. On the behalf of the Center for an Informed Public at the University of Washington, I'd like to welcome you to the third in a series of discussions with visiting legal fellows at University of Washington. I am Ryan Calo. I am one of the co-founders of the center, and I'm a law professor here at the School of Law, which is where we are right now. Our visitor today is none other than Danielle Citron. Danielle Citron is a law professor at University of Virginia, UVA, where she holds the Jefferson Scholars Foundation Distinguished Professorship, as well as the Chapman Professorship of Law. She's also the inaugural director of their new Law Tech Center. She is a globally renowned privacy scholar and scholar of cyber civil rights, and for her work, she received a MacArthur Fellowship in 2019. Most recently, her latest book, which was published, I believe, Danielle, was yesterday, is called The Fight for Privacy, Protecting Dignity, Identity, and Love in the Digital Age, which in the United States is carried by Norton and in the UK by Penguin Vintage. We're extraordinarily honored to have her visiting us here at University of Washington, and I really look forward to this conversation. So thank you so much for being here, Danielle.
Thank you. And there's nothing better than having my book come out when I get to be on the ground with you at the center together. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's lovely to have you here. And so I'm going to ask you 4 questions about the intersection of misinformation and the law. And the first is just this. So the first question is simply, what drew you to misinformation as an area of research?
I started thinking and writing about the targeting of women online, women and girls, in 2007. And so often the abuse that women and girls faced online was a sort of a pattern of abuse that always included defamation of a sexually demeaning and sexually threatening sort. So impersonations, that suggestion someone was interested in sex, and then lies about someone's sexual orientation, their sexual activities, sexually transmitted infections. And so often cyberstalking, this perfect storm of abuse, always included misinformation that was meant to destroy personal reputation.
And so that
and expose you to physical attack, right? Because if you impersonate someone, so of course that's misinformation, and you put their home address online and you say they're available for sex, the misinformation was not only damage reputation and exposed private information, but it made you vulnerable to physical attack.
I mean, I remember watching a TED Talk that you did about deepfakes, I and 4 million other people. And so is deepfakes part of that too? Has deepfakes been weaponized in that same way?
Yes, what was so both disheartening, of course, and not shocking and surprising at all, is so often women are the canaries in the coal mine. And so with each sort of advance in technology, of course, upsides of the technology, but also downsides that I could probably predict and did predict would have a really gendered impact. That was true of deepfakes. So Bobby Chesney and I started writing about deepfake videos in 2018 with the advent of, I think it's in January of 2018, there was a subreddit that emerged, Deepfake, created by someone called Mr. Deepfake, who was like a programmer by day, manufactured videos by night. And the focus was, of course, deepfake sex videos of women's faces being inserted into porn. And Bobby's a national security expert. I'm the privacy, and together we care about democracy and free expression. And so we joined together to write about the damaging potentials of deepfake sex videos, or deepfake videos. And what we saw then was that the predominant, the fakery that we were seeing online and the use of GAN's technology to create deepfakes was really deepfake sex videos of women's faces being morphed into porn. That was 2018.
Yeah.
That was 10,000 videos Sensity found online that were deepfakes, and they were mostly 92% deepfake sex videos and 99% of women's faces morphed into porn. Okay, that was 2019. Let's update it. 2021, Sensity comes out with a study. How many deepfakes have they found online? Over 50,000. And again, what are the majority? Not super majority, so 96%. The deepfakes found online are deepfake sex videos, and 96% have women's faces morphed into porn. So the story of deepfakes is very much a story about concerns about democracy and belief in truth, and how liars can weaponize deepfakes to run away from the truth. And of course, concerns about national security and mischief in elections. But on the ground, the concerns, how have they manifested? They've manifested with the direct impact on women and girls and women across the globe. So it's often celebrities, South Korea, India, so Bollywood, US actresses, and then everyday, ordinary women.
So my second question is follows directly from what you just said, and it's, what's your current research agenda right now around misinformation?
Yes.
I hesitate to ask somebody whose enormous book has just come out. Like, what are you working on now?
Yeah,
you could take a long break if you wanted, but do you have a current research agenda on misinformation?
I do. In fact, as it turns out, the center's work is so directly in mind because, the way in which we've seen women in particular face discrediting in all sorts of ways has only grown since I've been studying it since 2007, whether it's the discrediting of the Me Too movement and women who have sort of come out publicly and either sued their sexual harassers or brought claims of rape, who are then sued by their perpetrators for defamation. And more often those perpetrators are much well funded than their accusers. And so often we see accusers sort of give up, fold the tent of the lawsuit because they've been silenced by the use or misuse of the legal system. And I'm interested in all the ways we're seeing online information and information generally being used to silence and to terrify, terrorize, and to marginalize women, not only in the Me Too movement, but also as we're seeing in national security, that female politicians, lies about them online are driving politicians across the globe, female politicians, out of politics. And so the implications for democratic institutions, for national security, and in particular the ways in which gender and misinformation align. I'm going to be studying, sort of my research is moving again back in some ways to where I've been, but to see how more broadly and how often we're seeing lies being weaponized to marginalize, female politicians. So the implications for politics, for national security, and of course for everyday individuals.
Yeah. This next third question, in a sense, maybe a little bit leading, so feel free to push back. But
Okay.
my third question for you is, given the fact that you've been looking at this set of issues for quite some time, over a decade, a decade or two, is there anything about misinformation as an object of legal study or as the subject of legal study that's different from your prior work? Is misinformation presenting you with different or novel dimensions or challenges?
So for me, what I find most fascinating and I think somewhat underexplored are the sort of psychological impacts of fakery that's so convincing, video and audio that can be faked, and lies online that for some reason, which I think we need just more study around, of the sort of the ways in which it impacts our psyche and how lies become embedded, especially the negative and salacious. We've sort of long studied and understood that. Behavioral economic, the story of behavioral economics is also like we're bad decision makers. We seize onto the negative and the novel, and the positive sort of fades away in memory. But I'm interested to see, especially for a younger generation that have grown up with sort of fakery, doctored photos, the ways in which video and audio still seem to seize us, grab us in the gut, and never leave us. And I'm hoping to see more research on the ways in which are we as human beings adapting. I hate the response. I hate this, forgive me, but the response sometimes to my work around deepfakes is just get over it. Videos are no longer believable. Audio no longer believable. And my immediate response is, given the vast literature on human rights, is video and audio help us bear witness to harm in ways that are so uniquely important. We cannot and ought not run away from that important sort of story and the way in which it teaches us about our own inhumanity and cruelty. And so I don't want us to get over it. I want us to understand the ways in which we can bring truth to the fore without having to rely on our sort of base human instincts about what's salacious and novel and negative. So I'd love to explore ways in which we can help human beings sort of counter misinformation in ways in these online environments where you're so surrounded by misinformation. And how do we tackle the liar's dividend? How do we tackle this misinformation? How can we use behavioral cues to help us? I don't want to give up,
No.
I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, and the liar's dividend, of course, is this idea that if nothing is believable, then what the liar says is just as plausible as anything else.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
In a sense, you've anticipated my final question, which is about what you think is under-theorized or understudied. And what I love about your answer is it sounds to me that at one level it is precisely what distinguishes misinformation, and particularly visceral forms of it like images and videos and audio, precisely what distinguishes misinformation from what's come before is also the thing that maybe needs to be much more explored, which makes a lot of sense. But are there other parts of misinformation law that you feel are not getting enough attention by scholars?
Yes, I mean, so I find both really hard to answer the question of, well, what do we do about misinformation that relates to public health issues? Where we know what, under our commitments to the First Amendment, we would say, okay, you can punish lies so long as it causes harm that we've traditionally understood as harmful or cognizable. And in many ways, whether it's lies about COVID or it's lies about the climate, right, that do really bad things to ways in which voters behave, in which we respond to the environment, how irresponsible we're being, are ways that law, I am having a hard time writing a law, that we could make stick in the courts, right, that would tackle really harmful lies about public health. That I'm not sure we can do it. I don't know if law is up to the task. Some deepfakes that are defamation wreaking, yes, we can. I mean, I think we can write that law. Marianne Franks and I have worked on those kinds of laws about digital manipulation or impersonation, fabrication, that if it involves defamation, we can tackle. But public health issues, that's not about my individual reputation. That's corrosive to all of society. And you might think, that's precisely where that's a market failure. Law should step in. We need to have people believe in science. But I worry law isn't quite up to the task. And then, of course, then we need legal work thinking about how do we incentivize companies and platforms to work. There may be a ways that as legal thinkers and scholars, we can incentivize companies in other ways that may not be ex ante pro-regulatory, but have other sort of ways in.
I mean, excuse me. Public health is a great example. Another one is closely related is environmental harm.
Yes.
Right? I mean, how does one police claims about climate change?
Yes. And that is like the issue, what do they say, of the age?
Yeah.
I feel like
Those
I want,
two, perhaps. Yeah.
Right, that I want our kids to have a world to live in when they grow up or as they grow up. And I worry that if we don't tackle this misinformation, it's extinction. Like we're at that level of, I want a planet for them to live in.
Yeah.
That's habitable. So it seems to me those kinds of lies, that kind of misinformation is reckoning in misinformation. That is, we have to deal with it if we want a planet for any of us to live on, for humanity to continue. So I always think, gosh, there has to be a legal solution. I love legal tools, but I know it's a blunt instrument. So maybe just, I'm grateful for the work of the center because we have to be thinking really carefully about how we educate. If we can't educate the folks who are the parents and the grandparents, how do we educate the next generation, which I know you're doing at UW, and scholarship is you're doing it, but it's going to be, that's the issue of this age, right?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us today and this week. We're honored to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.